David was just a traveler, a human walking across a distant alien planet, far from Earth. He didn't plan to get involved in anything dangerous. He only wanted to explore, learn, and maybe find a place where he could stay for a while. But fate had other plans for him. That day, David was walking through a thick forest. Strange sounds echoed around him, birds with glowing wings, trees that whispered with the wind. He smiled, thinking this place was peaceful. But then, he heard screams. They were sharp, loud, and filled with fear. David stopped and listened. There was smoke in the air, black and thick. Somewhere nearby, people were in trouble. His heart told him to leave it alone. He was just one. Human, no weapons, no armor. But his feet moved anyway, faster and faster, until he reached a clearing. There, he saw a small alien village under attack. Creatures like raiders, tall, armored, with sharp weapons, were burning homes and capturing villagers. David hid behind a tree, his mind racing. He saw one girl, her skin pale blue, her hair silver like moonlight, being dragged by one of the raiders. Next to her, a strange sword was stuck in the ground. It was large, glowing softly, as if alive. No one dared to touch it. The girl screamed and kicked, but the raider laughed. David didn't think. His body moved on its own. He ran from the trees, straight toward the girl. The raider turned and growled, but David was faster. His hands grabbed the hilt of the sword. The moment he touched it, a wave of energy rushed through him. His vision flashed with strange lights. His body filled with strength he didn't know he had. The sword pulled free from the ground like it was waiting for him. The raider attacked, but David swung the sword, and the blade moved with him, smooth and sharp. The raider fell instantly, dead before he hit the ground. The girl gasped, staring at David like he was a ghost. But there was no time. More raiders charged at him. David had never fought before, but somehow he knew how to move. The sword guided his hands, his feet. He dodged, blocked, and struck with power. One by one, the raiders fell. The villagers saw what was happening. Inspired by David, they picked up sticks, stones, anything they could find, and joined the fight. Soon, the raiders fled, leaving behind their dead. David stood in the middle of the clearing, breathing hard. His clothes were torn, his body bruised. But he was alive. The sword in his hand still glowed faintly. The girl approached him carefully. She was young, but her eyes held wisdom and caution. You lifted the sword, she whispered. David looked at the weapon, confused. Yeah. It was just lying there. I needed something to fight. You don't understand, she said. That sword, it is the sacred blade of my clan. No one can lift it. Not unless, double quote. She stopped, looking pale. Unless what? David asked. She swallowed hard. The villagers gathered around them, all staring at David with wide eyes. Unless you are my fated protector, my destined mate. David blinked. Wait, what? The law of my people, the girl said. If a male lifts the sacred blade in defense of the clan's daughter, it is a binding right. You have claimed me as your wife. The words hit David like a punch. Whoa. I didn't mean for that. I was just trying to help. But the villagers were already bowing, chanting in their strange language. The girl looked at him with a mix of fear and wonder. What's your name? David asked. Liara, she said softly. And now? I am yours. David shook his head. This had to be some misunderstanding. He didn't come here to fight, and he certainly didn't come to marry an alien girl. I'm sorry, Liara, but I didn't know about your customs, David said. There must be a way to undo this. She shook her head slowly. There is no way. The sword chose you, now. We are bound. David looked at the sword again. It felt warm in his hand, like it was alive. He tried to drop it, but his hand didn't want to let go. What have I done? He whispered to himself. Above them, dark clouds formed. A storm was coming, not just in the sky, but in David's life. He had changed everything with one choice. One swing of a sword, and now he was trapped in a world of alien laws, ancient traditions, and a girl who called him ... husband. David barely slept that night. He sat inside a round wooden hut, built with strange materials that glowed faintly in the dark. Outside, he could hear the villagers whispering. Every time he stepped out, they stared at him like he was some chosen hero. Or a curse. Layara sat across from him, silent. She watched him with eyes full of thoughts she didn't say. Finally, David couldn't take the silence. "Okay," he said. "Tell me. What happens now?" Layara sighed. "The elders will speak with you at dawn. They will confirm the bond." "I don't want to confirm anything," David snapped. "I didn't ask for this." "I didn't ask either," she said, her voice sharp. "But the law is the law." David stood up, pacing the hut. "There must be a way out of this. I'm not part of your world, your customs. I'm just ... human." "You are the one who pulled the sword," she replied quietly. "That alone seals the bond." David shook his head. "Why is that sword so important?" Layara looked down at her hands, then spoke slowly. "The sacred sword belongs to my family. Only my true mate can lift it, the one who will stand between me and death." David stared at the blade leaning against the wall. It still glowed softly, as if watching them. "But I didn't know." David argued. "The sword knew," Layara whispered. Before David could answer, the village horn blew. A deep, hollow sound. It was time. Villagers gathered in a large circle around the central fire pit. In the middle stood 3 elders, ancient. Aliens with silver hair and eyes that shimmered like the stars. David stepped forward, Layara by his side. The elders studied him, their expressions unreadable. "You have taken the sacred blade," one of them said in a deep voice. "Do you understand what you have done, human?" "No, I don't," David said honestly. "I just tried to help her." The elder nodded. "And yet, help you did. The sword does not lift itself for just anyone. You are bound to Layara now. By the right of protection." David clenched his fists. "But I didn't agree to any of this." The elder's eyes glowed. "The sword agreed on your behalf." David swallowed. This was insane. A sword deciding his fate? Then a heavy voice broke through the crowd. "I challenge this bond." Everyone turned to see a tall warrior step forward. He was massive, skin dark gray, eyes burning red, muscles like stone. He wore armor made of bones. It was Croth. "Clan's best warrior. I was meant to protect Layara," Croth growled. "I trained for it, fought for it. A human has no right." The crowd murmured, some agreeing. Kro to Hutch looked straight at David. "Fight me. Prove you deserve her." David raised his hands. "I'm not fighting anyone. I didn't come here to steal someone's bride." "Then you forfeit," Croth sneered. "And the penalty for breaking the right is death." David's mouth went dry. The elder raised his hand. "It is true. If the bond is challenged, the human must either fight or accept the sentence." David looked at Layara, expecting her to say something, to protest. But she stood there, looking away, ashamed. "You're just going to let them kill me?" David asked her, hurt. She finally looked up. "If you refuse, you die. If you fight, you might live." David laughed bitterly. "Great options." The elder stepped forward. "Tomorrow at sunrise, the challenge will be settled. Prepare yourself, human." The villagers dispersed, some laughing, others shaking their heads at the foolish human. Who dared touch the sacred sword? David stood there, lost. Layara walked up to him, voice soft. "I'm sorry, I didn't want this." "Then help me," David said. "Train me. Teach me how to survive." She looked at him, surprised. "You would fight for me?" "I'd fight for myself," David snapped. "But, yeah, if I'm stuck." In this madness I'll need help. Liara stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she nodded. Double quotes fine. Meet me by the river before the sun touches the sky, she said. If you want to live, I'll teach you. She walked away, her silver hair catching the moonlight. David sighed, looking up at the alien sky. What the hell did I get myself into? He muttered. The sacred sword sat in the corner, glowing faintly. David glanced at it and felt something stir inside his mind, like the sword was waiting for him again. Tomorrow, he would have to fight an alien warrior stronger and deadlier than any human. If he failed, he'd die. If he won, he'd still be married. Somehow dying sounded easier. David wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Before the sun rose, the village was already awake. Fires crackled, warriors sharpened their blades, and the air was thick with excitement. A fight was coming, the human against their strongest warrior, Croth. Most of them believed it wouldn't even be a fight. The human would die before the first strike. David stood at the riverbank, watching his reflection ripple in the water. He had dark circles under his eyes. He didn't sleep. How could he? He was about to fight a monster, and he had no idea how. Liara stood nearby, holding a wooden staff. She had tied her silver hair into a tight braid. She didn't smile, didn't show pity. You're not ready, she said bluntly. David sighed. Yeah, thanks, I figured. But I'll try to give you a chance, she continued. The sword responds to willpower, not strength. If you hesitate, it will fail you. David looked at the sacred sword lying on the grass beside him. Why does it feel alive? Lyra's expression grew distant. Because it is. The blade holds the spirit of my ancestors. It chooses the one worthy of protecting the clan's daughter. David picked it up. It hummed softly, warm-like a heartbeat. But in his hands, it still felt heavy. Liara took a stance with her staff. We don't have time for deep lessons. You need to stay on your feet. Dodge. Strike only when you see an opening. She lunged at him. David barely raised the sword in time, blocking her swing. The shock of impact shook his arms. Faster. She shouted. She struck again and again, forcing David to move, block, stumble. His body screamed with pain, but he pushed through. Hours passed, the sky turning pale orange. David's shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands blistered. Again. Liara snapped, swinging low. David jumped back, then countered clumsily. She blocked easily. You hesitate, she said coldly. You'll die like that. David threw the sword down in frustration. I'm not a soldier, I'm just me. Liara stepped closer, eyes serious. But the sword chose you. So you must be more than you think. David looked at her. For a moment, their eyes met, not as teacher and student, but as two people trapped in the same fate. You need to trust the sword, she said softly. Trust yourself. Before David could answer, a horn sounded from the village. It's time, Liara said. The village gathered around the central arena, a wide circle of dirt and stones. At the edge, the elders stood, watching with cold eyes. Croth was already there, stretching his massive arms, grinning like a predator. When David stepped into the circle, the crowd whispered. Some placed bets on how fast he'd die. David held the sacred sword tight. It was now or never. The elder raised his hand. The challenge of the bond begins. If the human wins, the right stands. If he loses, his life is forfeit. Croth cracked his knuckles. Don't worry, human. I'll make it quick. David swallowed hard. The elder dropped his hand. Begin. Croth charged like a beast, his massive axe swinging high. David's instincts screamed. He barely rolled aside, the axe smashing the ground where he stood. Dust flew everywhere. The crowd cheered. David got to his feet, gasping. Croth laughed. Run faster, little human. David gritted his teeth and raised the Sword. It glowed brighter, humming with energy. Croth attacked again, each swing heavy and wild. David dodged, but barely. His arms burned, legs weak. Every time he blocked, it felt like his bones would snap. But then, he felt it. The sword's hum wasn't just sound, it was guidance. A rhythm. David closed his eyes for a second, listening. The next time Croth attacked, David didn't block. He sidestepped perfectly. The axe missing by inches. The crowd gasped. Kroth growled. You got lucky. But David moved smoother now, as if the sword whispered where to go. He ducked, weaved, struck small cuts when he could. Liara watched from the edge, eyes wide. She could feel it. The sword was truly guiding him. Croth roared in frustration, charging recklessly. That was his mistake. David waited. Then struck. His blade sliced across Croth's leg, deep enough to make the warrior stumble. Croth howled and swung wildly, but David was faster now. He slashed again, a cut across Croth's arm. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were shocked. Kroth, bleeding and furious, roared one last time, raising his axe for a final strike. David saw it, the opening. With all his strength, he drove the sacred sword into Croth's side. The blade sank deep. Croth froze, gasped. Then collapsed. Silence. Then, the elder raised his hand. The human has won. The villagers erupted in noise, some cheers, some anger. David fell to his knees, gasping, drenched in sweat and blood. Liara rushed to his side, helping him up. You did it, she whispered. David looked at the fallen Croth. I didn't want to kill him. You had no choice, Liara said. The elder approached. The right stands. You are now bound to Liara by victory. David wanted to scream, to run. But the sword pulsed gently in his hand, as if reminding him of his place here. He looked at Liara. She wasn't smiling, but she didn't look away. This was his life now, a human, married by alien law, and still unsure if this was destiny or a curse. David woke to pain. His muscles ached, his arms barely moved, and every breath felt like his ribs might snap. He lay inside a hut, the sacred sword resting beside him. Outside, the village was still busy, but this time, no one whispered insults. He had won the challenge. Croth was dead, but David didn't feel like a winner. Liara entered quietly, holding a small bowl of glowing blue water. Without asking, she sat by him, offered it. Drink, it helps with the pain, she said. David drank slowly. It tasted like cold metal, but warmth spread through his body. Some of the pain faded. Thanks, he said softly. Liara sat silently, her eyes distant. She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't know what to say. Finally, David broke the silence. So, I guess we're really married now? Liara's shoulders stiffened. Yes, the bond is sealed, David laughed bitterly. We don't even know each other. Liara looked at him then, her silver eyes sharp. I didn't choose this either, but the sword chose you. That means something. David looked at the blade. It feels alive, like it knows me. Liara nodded. It does. The sword is bound to my bloodline. It recognizes those who protect its bearer. David frowned. But I'm not one of you. I'm not even from this world, she sighed. The sword doesn't care about species. It sees the heart. David shook his head. I just wanted to help. Not get married. They both sat in heavy silence. Then Liara stood up. There is more. What do you mean? The bond isn't just symbolic, she said carefully. It's deeper. The sword linked our souls. David sat up sharply. Linked? How? You might have felt it already. Glimpses of my thoughts, feelings in the middle of the fight? David froze. Yes, he remembered flashes, fear, determination, even her voice guiding him. But he thought it was his imagination. Liara continued. It's the bond. If either of us is in danger, the other feels it. David stared at her. That's a lot. She looked away. There's more. The bond cannot be broken. Unless one of us dies. David exhaled slowly. So I'm stuck. Lyra's voice was cold. We both are. Before he could respond, the horn blew again, a deep, vibrating sound. Lyra's eyes widened. What now? David asked. The raiders, she whispered. They've returned. David stood up, ignoring the pain. Already? Lyra nodded. And this time, they brought more. They stepped outside. The sky was dark, though the sun was still high. Smoke on the horizon. The scouts reported a large force approaching. Dozens of raiders, better armed, with strange beasts carrying. Their supplies. Panic spread among the villagers. Without Croth, their best warrior, they had no champion left. The elders gathered the people. One spoke loudly, we must flee. But another elder shook his head. We cannot. The human carries the sacred sword. If we run, they will chase us for it. Everyone turned to David. He felt the weight of their stares. Fear, hope, expectation. He wasn't a leader, wasn't even one of them, but the sword, the bond. It had placed him here. Lyra stepped closer. What will you do? David looked. At her, then at the villagers. I'll fight, he said. But not alone. Some villagers murmured in surprise. David raised his voice. If we run, we die tired. If we fight together, we have a chance. But we're farmers, not soldiers. One shouted. David smiled faintly. I'm just a traveler. But if I can kill Croth, you can stand too. The elders discussed in whispers, then finally nodded. We will fight. Lyra stood beside David. What's your plan? David looked at the village, then at the river, the hills, the woods. He remembered strategies from old human stories, war films, history books. We use traps, ambushes. We make them pay for every step. Lyra's eyes softened, a hint of respect in them. You think like a warrior, David chuckled. I fake it well. For the next few hours, David led the villagers to prepare defenses. Spikes hidden in mud, rocks positioned to roll, ropes to trip enemies. Lyra taught them how to fight in pairs, while David shared simple human tactics like attacking. From shadows, using narrow paths to limit enemy numbers. Night came. The fires were dimmed. Everyone waited, tense and silent. Then the drums started. The raiders arrived, dozens of them, armored, confident. Their leader was taller than Croth, his face hidden under a bone mask. They marched forward, laughing, sure of victory. But then, the first trap sprung. Spikes rose from the ground, impaling the front line. Rocks tumbled from hidden cliffs, crushing several raiders. Panic spread. Then David, with the sacred sword glowing bright, charged with a group of villagers. They struck fast, using surprise. The bond with Lyra let him sense when to dodge, when to strike. She fought beside him, The raider leader stood still, his bone mask glowing faintly under the night sky. His army waited behind him, silent and eager to charge. The villagers, bruised and tired, stood behind David, clutching their crude weapons. Fear hung in the air. Like smoke, David stared at the masked leader, his grip tight on the sacred sword. The blade pulsed gently, as if alive, sensing the danger ahead. The leader stepped closer. You know what you carry, human. His voice was deep cold. That sword. It's no ordinary weapon. David didn't answer. He wasn't sure himself what the sword truly was, only that it connected him to Lyra. That alone made it important. The leader chuckled darkly. That blade holds a secret older than your species. A bond forged not just in blood, but in soul. David's heart pounded. He glanced at Lyra, who stood beside him, her staff ready. She looked pale, her eyes focused on the raider. What does he mean? David asked her. Liara didn't answer immediately. She looked down, almost ashamed. Then she whispered, "I should have told you sooner." "Told me what?" David pressed. "The sacred sword isn't just my clan's treasure." She confessed. "It's a soul weaver. The one who lifts it while protecting me, ... binds not just to me, but to every soul that carried this blade before." David stared at her. "What does that mean?" Liara swallowed hard. "It means you carry the memories, the strength, and the burdens of my ancestors. That's why it feels alive. They're inside it." David's mind raced. The flashes of instinct during the fights, the whispers, the sudden knowledge of movements. It wasn't just the sword guiding him. It was the echo of those who came before. The raider leader pointed his weapon at David. "You don't even understand the power you hold. That blade can command not just people, but entire destinies." "I want it." David gritted his teeth. "Too bad. I'm keeping it." The leader sneered. "Then die with it." With a roar, the raiders charged. David stood his ground, the villagers following him. The battlefield turned chaotic, metal clashing, screams rising, blood staining the dirt, but David moved differently now. Every time he swung the sword, it was as if invisible hands guided him. His strikes were sharper, his step sure. He felt flashes of others, warriors of old, battles he'd never seen but somehow remembered. He turned just in time to block a raider's axe, then countered with a swift slash. The sword sang through the air, cutting clean. Nearby, Liara fought fiercely. She moved with grace and speed, her staff a blur. But David could feel her exhaustion through the bond. Every time she was struck, he felt a sting in his chest. Then, the raider leader entered the fight. He was fast, too fast. His blade clashed against David's, sending shocks up his arms. "You're strong, human," the leader growled, "but not enough." David struggled to keep up. The leader's strikes were heavy, brutal. Slowly, David was being pushed back. Suddenly, pain shot through his side. A shallow cut, but deep enough to weaken him. He stumbled, gasping. The leader raised his weapon for a killing blow. But then, David felt it, a spark in his mind, a memory that wasn't his. A vision of a warrior woman, standing tall with the same sword, facing death but smiling. She whispered in his mind, "We fight for those we love." "Stand!" David's eyes snapped open. His grip tightened. He rolled aside just before the blow landed, then swung upward with all his strength. The sacred sword glowed bright, blindingly bright. His blade sliced through the leader's mask, shattering it. The raider leader screamed as light poured from the wound. He stumbled back, clutching his face. David stood, breathing hard. "You want the sword? Take it from me." With a final shout, David charged, driving the sword deep into the leader's chest. Light burst from the blade, engulfing the raider. Then silence. The leader collapsed. Dead, the remaining raiders, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran into the night. The battlefield was quiet. The villagers stared in disbelief. They had won. David dropped to his knees, the sword humming softly. Liara rushed to him, holding his face gently. "You did it. You survived." David looked at her, still gasping. "It wasn't just me. It was them, the ones in the sword." Liara nodded. "They're part of you now," David laughed weakly. "Great. Now I've got ghosts too." She smiled faintly, brushing his hair back. "Not ghosts, guides." The villagers cheered. The elders declared victory, but also a warning. The sword had revealed its true power, and others would come seeking it. David stood slowly. "Let them come," he said. "I'm not running." Liara's eyes softened. She didn't say it aloud, but through the bond, David felt her relief, her gratitude, and something deeper. A connection growing stronger. The sacred sword glowed, faintly as if proud, but deep down David knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Days passed after the battle. The village was quiet again, but there was no joy, only tension. Everyone repaired homes, sharpened weapons, and watched the horizon with worried eyes. They knew more enemies would come. Word had spread. A human now wielded the sacred sword, and that was a prize too tempting for any warlord to ignore. David stood on the village wall, watching the sky. The bond with Liara had grown stronger. He didn't need to see her to know. When she was near, he could feel her presence like a gentle warmth in his mind. Liara joined him, her steps light. She looked at him quietly, as if measuring his strength. "You haven't rested much," she said. David shook his head. "Hard to sleep when you know you painted a target on your back." Liara glanced at the horizon. "You've changed." David looked at her. "Yeah? How?" "You don't walk like a lost traveler anymore," she said. "You stand like a leader." David chuckled dryly. "That's funny, because I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing." Liara's lips curved in the smallest smile. "But you're still standing." They shared a quiet moment, but then a horn sounded, sharp, urgent. A scout ran up the path, shouting, "They're coming! More raiders, twice as many as before." The villagers gathered, their faces pale. Elders approached David. "What are your orders, chosen one?" David clenched his fists. He wasn't a general, but they looked to him like he was their only hope. "How many?" He asked. "More than 100, the scout said. "And they have siege beasts with them." David's heart sank. He looked at Liara. Through their bond, he felt her fear and her trust in him. "We make our stand here," David said firmly. "We don't let them breach the walls." The villagers cheered weakly, trying to gather courage. That night, David walked the perimeter of the village, checking every defense. He barely noticed when Liara walked beside him. "You're carrying too much weight," she said softly. David frowned. "I have to. If I don't, people die." Liara touched his arm. "You're not alone." David paused, looking into her silver eyes. He could feel it through the bond, her heartbeat, her steady presence. It gave him strength he didn't know he needed. He smiled faintly. "Thanks." Then the ground shook. A deep, rhythmic thumping. The raiders had arrived. They marched from the dark woods, torches blazing, shadows moving behind them, large creatures with thick hides and massive battering clubs tied to their arms. At the front, a new leader rode a black-scaled beast. His armor was darker than night, his eyes glowing red. He raised his hand, voice like thunder. "Give us the sword and the girl, or we burn your village to ashes." David stood on the wall, raising the sacred sword high. "You want it? Come take it." The raiders roared, charging. Siege beasts slammed into the wooden walls, shaking the ground. Raiders climbed with hooks and ropes, their war cries piercing the night. David moved fast, the sacred sword leading him. He struck down raiders climbing the wall, the blade slicing through armor like cloth. But there were too many. Liara fought by his side, staff spinning, her strikes quick and precise. But David could feel her exhaustion through the bond. She was pushing herself too hard. "Liara, fall back." He shouted. She shook her head. "Not without you." A siege beast smashed through part of the wall, sending wood flying. Raiders poured in. David jumped down, landing hard. Pain shot through his legs, but he stood and fought, the sword a blur of silver light. But for every raider he killed, 3 more came. Then he saw the dark leader stepping through the breach. His eyes locked on David. "I will take that blade," the leader growled, his voice like gravel. David raised his sword, but the leader was fast, unnaturally fast. He struck with a heavy axe, and David barely blocked. The impact sent shocks through his body. "You're strong for a human," the leader sneered. "But you are not enough." David gasped for breath, barely staying on his feet. His vision blurred, but then the bond Lyra's fear hit him like a wave, but so did her resolve. He could feel her heartbeat, her hope. Her trust in him. It gave him the strength to stand. "I'm not alone," David said through gritted teeth. The sword glowed brighter, humming with power. David parried the next strike and countered, slicing deep into the leader's side. The dark leader roared in pain, but didn't fall. Behind David, Liara reached out, her voice steady. "David. Together." She placed her hand on his back. The bond between them flared, a connection of mind, soul, and heart. Power flooded David's limbs, his senses sharpened. With a cry, he struck again, the sacred sword blazing like a star. The leader's axe shattered. The blade pierced his chest. Light exploded outward, throwing raiders back, their leader dead. The raiders panicked and fled. Silence followed. David stood panting, Liara holding his arm. The village was damaged, but it stood. The elders approached, bowing deeply. "You saved us again, chosen one." "Deh." The sun rose slowly over the battered village, its soft golden light falling on broken walls and scattered weapons. The air was still, too still. But this time, it was not because of fear. It was peace. David stood alone on the hill just beyond the village, watching the sky change colors. His body ached, his clothes torn, but the sacred sword in his hand felt warm, not heavy, not demanding, just present, like an old friend. He had fought, bled, and survived, but something still weighed on his heart. The villagers called him Chosen One, a warrior, a leader. But inside he was still just David, the man who had stumbled into a fight that wasn't his. He heard footsteps behind him. He didn't have to look to know it was Liara. The bond between them told him she was near even before she spoke. "You didn't come back last night?" Liara said quietly. David smiled faintly. "I needed to think." Liara stood beside him, her silver hair glowing in the sunlight. "About what?" David stared at the horizon. "About all this, the sword, the bond, you." Liara lowered her gaze. "If you wish to leave, I understand. The law forced this bond. I won't stop you." David turned to her, surprised. "You'd let me walk away?" Liara sighed. "You never asked for this. And I don't want you to stay just because a sword made you." David looked at the sacred sword. "It's more than the sword now. I didn't understand before, but I do now." Liara glanced up, confused. David continued. "I felt it, when we fought together, when you stood beside me. The bond. It's not just the sword's magic. It's us. I felt your fear, your strength, your hope." Liara swallowed, her voice soft. "And?" David smiled. "I don't want to walk away. Not because of tradition, or magic, or law, but because I choose to stay." Liara's eyes widened. David stepped closer, his voice steady. "I want to stay with you." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then her lips curved into a small, genuine smile, the first real one David had seen on her. "Then you should know something," Liara said. "What?" She took his hand, placing it on the sacred sword between them. The sword didn't choose blindly. It chose because ... Deep inside you already wanted to protect. David blinked. "But I didn't know you." Liara shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The desire to protect, to stand for others, that's what the sword recognizes. That's why it chose you." David laughed softly. "I guess I didn't know myself very well." They stood there, quiet, their hands touching on the blade. Then Liara spoke, almost a whisper. "So ... you're my husband now?" David chuckled. "I guess so." She looked into his eyes. "Then act like it." David smiled, then reached up and gently touched her cheek. The bond between them pulsed, warm and alive. No longer just a connection of magic, it was real, chosen. They stayed like that until the sun was high. Back in the village, repairs were underway. The walls were rebuilt stronger, the people worked with purpose. When David and Liara returned, The villagers greeted them not just with respect, but with smiles. The elders called for a gathering. Standing before the people, the eldest of them raised his staff. "David of Earth, you have fought for us. You have led us. And by right of the sacred sword, you are one of us." David looked around, seeing faces of those he had saved, those who now trusted him. The elder turned to Liara. "And you, Liara of the silver blood, do you accept this bond by heart and by choice?" Liara stepped forward, her voice clear. "I do." Then the elder looked at David. "And you, David, do you accept Liara not by law, but by choice?" David glanced at Liara. He remembered all they had been through, the battles, the pain, the silent moments of connection. He smiled. "I do." The crowd cheered. The elders raised their hands in blessing. "You are now bonded, by law, by heart, and by the soul." Liara stood beside David, her hand in his. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, David didn't feel like an outsider. He felt home. Later that night, as the stars filled the sky, Liara and David sat together on the hill. "What now?" Liara asked. David looked up at the stars. "Now, we build a life, a home. Maybe even make sure no one else tries to take the sword." Liara smiled. "You'll still have to prove yourself every day." David laughed. "That's marriage, isn't it?" Liara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yes, it is." Above them, the sacred sword rested, its glow faint but steady, a symbol of a bond not of destiny, but of choice. And together, they watched the stars, ready to face whatever future waited for them.